Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Unknown Draft League podcast brought to you by Smeargle and Lime. I'm Smeargle, joined by Lime. How are you, buddy?
I am doing great, man. We, of course, were able to get finished up with the formalities in the last video. We were able to go over the team roster, some of our predictions, and all that. However, this episode, we're really going to have some meat to sink our teeth into, as the league has finally started. Of course, kicking us off with week 1. There was no video last week due to the fact that the week had started, for lack of a better term, in the middle of the week. So there was given a little bit of a time extension for this start of the league. However, going forward, this will be a weekly thing, and I look forward to bringing it to you all. I assume the same is true for you, Smeargle?
Absolutely. Week by week is definitely a lot more fun. And these matches are pretty fun to watch.
We had some excellent showings this week. Of course, we don't want to go ahead and just have all the heavy hitters go right off the bat, so why don't we just go down in order? Smeargle, would you prefer to start us off with match 1?
First of all, we've got first to submit. We had the Colorado Choodles versus the Forsaken City Frogadiers.
These teams are spearheaded by Fred and Hazel, respectively.
With Hazel bringing Chi-Yu, Zorua, Klefki, Greninja, Toadscroll, and Noivern.
A little addendum, it was Hisuian Zorua, not Unova.
My bad.
Fred, captain of the Colorado Choodles, brought Chen Pao, Gallade, Abomasnow, Braviary, Hisuian Arcanine, and Vaporeon to round out the team.
I just noticed this was a Hisuian versus Hisuian match.
In a sense, yes. Both people did have a Mon from that on their team. I mean, if we want to continue the parallels even further, both of them also had a Ruin on their team.
Which Ruin is better?
I'm not here to debate that. Of course, my answer lies firmly in Wo-Chien. The snail will prevail, but that's not what we're here to discuss now.
No.
Leading off the game, turn 1, we saw a lead of Greninja from Hazel. This isn't anything special on its own. But however, turn 1, yeah. However, did we really get the Greninja lead? Turn 1, it clicked Protect, and it did not turn into the normal type. Of course, this is possible, that it's just simply running Torrent instead of Protean. Even though it's, not the better ability, it could have some application. But as you probably all expected, it wasn't Greninja. It was Hisuian Zorua, and it was able to get some great value by absorbing some hits that were meant for the Dark type Greninja.
I did just realize, actually, with the Protect not showing off a Protean Greninja, the Sacred Sword and Brick Break from Gallade and Qianpao double targeted into what is revealed to be the Zorua. Of course, both of which are immune, but it could reflect Fred doubling up into a possible Torrent Greninja.
Right. It's definitely a risky play. It's possible that it's the Zorua. It's possible that Hazel's trying to be a bit sneaky by running a less common Greninja ability to throw them off. Hard to say which way it actually goes. But beyond that turn 1 lead, there was definitely more to the game. The Gallade ended up proving its value tenfold by making sure that screens never stayed up for long. The Klefki from Hazel's side, it didn't get to do anything. Its Thunder Waves weren't able to hit the Chen Pao thanks to its Dark typing. Its screens weren't able to do anything because the Gallade just kept clicking Brick Break over and over, making sure it didn't get to do anything. And so Klefki was sort of left to just sit on the field.
And then in both games, the Chi-Yu tried its best but got one shot, even after trying to Terra out of a KO range.
Exactly, yes. Game 2, Chi-Yu was led, and it attempted to go for a Water Terror to make it so that it wouldn't be weak to, say, a Brick Break from Gallade. However, a neutral X-Scissor was just able to KO outright. I mean, we know Gallade got Sharpness, giving it that free choice band, but man, this thing hits hard.
It really does.
But yeah, once again, we see in Game 2, Klefki just sort of runs out of things to do. It gets am-fatted is the term. All my friends are dead, basically meaning that when a Pokemon is too passive, you can just sort of ignore it and KO all the teammates, and Klefki definitely struggled with that here. For one big flaw it had was no way to deal damage. It had Reflect, Thunder Wave, Light Screen, and then a 4th supporting move. It had no way to deal damage, so it was just sitting there helpless.
And we did notice as well the Zorua got the free turns with the two immunities, but then when it
Hmm.
got the turn to attack with the Bitter Malice, it only did 71% to the Gallade. It didn't take a KO.
I mean, we say it didn't take a KO. Definitely the potential momentum swing from getting the two immunity hits, as well as the fact that remember, this is Zorua we're talking about. This is a low tier Pokemon, so it being able to
Of
do that
course.
much damage is pretty good in its own right. But yes, unfortunately, Hazel just wasn't able to take advantage of the high tempo play that would have been, getting those free turns because the Klefki just sort of worked against her, all things considered.
Yep.
Hmm. Now,
Moving
another thing I do want to mention, not in belittlement of Hazel, but rather in compliment of Fred. Hisui and Arcanine, we hadn't really mentioned it up until this point, but it having Terra Normal Extreme Speed on top of that massive attack stat is already great, right? However, it sitting next to Chen Pao is very reminiscent of how people are currently using Dragonite in the current VGC format. And even if it may not be the exact same as Dragonite, the fact that you can practically replicate that in a draft context is really scary. And it's definitely something that has to be looked out for.
with Intimidate plus its natural stabs on top of that, it is very dangerous.
Mm-hmm. A very scary team overall, and it's one that allowed the Colorado Choodles a clean 2-0 victory against the Forsaken City Frogadiers.
Moving on to game two, we had the Giddy Gumi versus the Shanghai Shedinjas, with the Giddy Gumis bringing Thundurus, Oricorio, Lilligant, Slacking, Mimikyu, and Quaquaval.
Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, on the side of the Shanghai Shedinjas, we have Greninja again, second Greninja. A symptom of the split draft pools we had. Alongside that was Lycanroc, Rillaboom, Arcanine, Persian Alola, and Electric. Not Electros, Electric. The middle stage. Something you definitely don't see too often. But
Eh,
it definitely was able to prove its value. I mean, turn one, the Thunderous wants to go ahead and set up Sunny Day for all of the Sun abusers that Fro has, Fro being the coach of the Giddy Gumis. Things like the Oricorio's Fire Stab, the Chlorophyll for the Lilligant, all that. But Electric, it just clicked Rain Dance, which
the
certainly not a
turn
movie you would
one
expect
Rain
it.
Dance.
Yeah, it's certainly not a move you would expect this thing to learn, let alone something that would be brought, but ended up being a great play, as not only does it deny the sun, it forces the Thunderous to try and either accept that the sun is gone, or it has to waste another turn to try and set it up again, which, hey, great tempo play there. If you're having your Electric force their Thunderous to click a move twice, I think that's great value.
It was huge value. Unfortunately, Thundurus did put in some work with moves like Thunderwave and Thunderbolt.
Oh, it definitely did. There are some other things to note about this match. Notably, entrainment, a move that's used to, try and have your ability go onto your partner, was attempted to be used into the slacking to remove Truant. However, as some of you may already know,
That
Truant
doesn't
cannot
work.
be replaced. It doesn't work. So it was a cool idea. It's definitely something that would have been cool had it worked, but it just doesn't. Really hate to see it. But hey, at the very least, they did still get some good value thanks to things like Dancer. The Oricorio really shined in this set. It
It
was
was
getting so many
huge.
attacks. Like, we know that the Thunderous is the S tier on this team. It felt like Oricorio was what it was really built around. You had dance moves from the Lilligant, you had the Aqua Step from the Quaquaval, and something we see in game two, Mimikyu actually clicks Mimic to steal Revelation Dance and allow Oricorio to be able to click it while also being protected. Like, it genuinely feels like this isn't a Thunderous team. This is an Oricorio team.
Being able to click moves like Protect and still get off an attack or
It's
attack
big.
into a Quiver Dance, it was
Mm-hmm.
huge.
I completely agree. On Ninja's side, to speak more of their roster for a moment, something we saw was supportive Arcanine. This is, of course, nothing new. It's a great defensive Pokemon, but more than just, crippling Pokemon with things like Will-O-Wisp and cycling Intimidate, it also tried to run Howl to try and boost attack of the attack of Ninja's Pokemon, things like the Rillaboom. Unfortunately, this didn't pan out too well, as the Pokemon that did get the attack boost kind of just ended up getting KO'd. So those turns ended up feeling a little bit wasted.
And then the last turn.
Yes, it is very unfortunate. The game state came down to a Thundurus, which was at, I think it was 3%
It
health,
was
and
3%.
a paralyzed Lycanroc.
That
The
still
Thundurus
moved
was able
first.
to. Mhm. The Thundurus was able to two-shot the Lycanroc, but of course Lycanroc could just go ahead and kill the Thundurus. Unfortunately, a full para does cause the game to be swung in Fro's favor, where otherwise, had that 25% chance not happened, it would have been Ninja's win. You hate to see it, it's always unfortunate, but that is the game we play at the end of the day.
And that is not to discredit Fro.
Oh, absolutely. They did play very well. We saw great turn efficiency. Like we said, the Dancer allowing things like Quiver Dance. It allows things like Protect with offensive things. We even see things like Aqua Step plus Protect in order to help shore up a speed drop it gets from Icy Wind. Like, they did a great job of optimizing their turns and making sure they were able to squeeze every little drop out of them they could. Of course, this barring the turn where they click Entrainment into a Slacken.
Small missteps, but it's only week 1.
Yes, it's an easy mistake to make. If you aren't someone who is too familiar with, reading the wiki or just other niche interactions, it's very easy to forget.
On the quick note, it was somewhat an unlucky game for Ninja, missing a number of icy wins that would have mattered as well.
Yes, that's referring to game 2. Yes. Quaquaval, I mean, was this thing holding a Bright Powder? I don't think it was, but it felt like it. By turn 5, it had dodged 3 separate attacks, all of which had over 90% accuracy. This thing, I mean, you see how much it's dancing in its idle animation. Evidently, it's doing more than just dancing. It's dodging.
Not
Now,
just
in game
dodging, it
2,
is doing work.
yes, it was doing work. Of those 3 missed attacks, many of them were Icy Winds, which wouldn't have ended up lowering its speed because it was holding the Clear Amulet, but this wasn't something Ninja had known until the Arcanine was brought in. After the Arcanine was brought in, and the Clear Amulet was revealed by Intimidate, an unfortunate misplay from Ninja happens where they attempt to Parting Shot into the Quaquaval. For those who may not know, Parting Shot is only allows you to make the switch if you lower their stats. So if you Parting Shot into a Clear Amulet Pokemon or a Clear Body Pokemon, you don't get the switch. So it was a very unfortunate misplay. Again, it's a very small interaction and it's easy to forget, but that's sort of the beauty of Pokemon, and that's something that was really on display here in this set. Just all the small niche interactions that can come up and make the game so interesting.
It was definitely a very fun set to watch. I I really actually loved watching Fro play with the dancer.
I had mentioned in the team preview, I thought their roster was really interesting, and I was looking forward to them playing. I wasn't disappointed. The dancer stuff was really, really cool, and it's really interesting. I genuinely do look forward to continuing to see their matches. But
Absolutely.
all that said, once again, similar to the first game, this did end in a 2-0 victory, this time for the Giddy Goomies. Moving on to the next set, we had the Stockholm Sprigatitos versus the Tartarus Tandemouse.
Would you like to lead us off?
I suppose so. Well, for this game, we do have the Stockholm Sprigatitos, led by Kemmel, who did bring the team of Landorus Therian, Pelipper, Bascule Legion Male, Dreadnought, Shroomish, and Arboliva.
Facing off against the Tartarus Tanmouse with Articuno Galar, Stantler, Garchomp, Talonflame, Pachirisu, and Sneasler. Now,
Yes, definitely interesting rosters.
I did want Lime to lead this off. When he saw the turn 1 play coming out from the Tanmouse,
My
it
jaw
was
dropped.
exciting.
I'll be entirely honest.
And I would like you.
My jaw dropped. Yes, I can definitely rant about this. I can rave about this, I think is the more accurate term, because what a phenomenal play. So let me paint a little bit of a picture here. Turn 1, Kemmel leads with the Pelipper and the Dreadnought. The Pelipper uses Drizzle to set up its rain. Unova leads with Galarian Articuno and Stantler. Stantler showing Intimidate. Turn 1, the Gardecuno protects from an Ice Spinner from the Dreadnought, and the Stantler does, I think, what may have been the play of the entire week. It uses Skill Swap. Now, that in of itself doesn't sound too crazy, but think about it in this context. Skill Swap from the Stantler into the Dreadnought. Not only does it kill the speed control Kemmels has, as Dreadnought loses its Swift Swim ability, and it gives that ability to Stantler, so it's going to be able to move faster on following turns, but also, the Dreadnought got Intimidate. And that Intimidate was able to trigger Unova's own Gardecuno's competitive, giving it a free nasty plot as it just protected. And now at this point, they're so far ahead. They got a free nasty plot. They have the speed control. Kemmel's speed control has been robbed from them, and they're a sitting duck. From that point in the game, I mean, Galarian Articuno just went crazy.
It picked up, I think it picked up 3 KOs?
It picked up, I think, 2 or 3 kills in game 1, but believe me when I say that was not all. That one gimmick, that was not everything. I mean, taking all 4 KOs is crazy. I just double-checked my notes. Yes, it took all 4 KOs. And more than just taking all 4 KOs, it took all 4 KOs as one-shots. Gardecuno did 400% damage in 4 attacks during that game.
That's crazy. And
that's insane.
Let's not disrespect the Pachirisu did work as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Pachirisu is always an underdog. It's someone that everyone loves to see. Ever since 2014, it's become a bit of a meme, and for good reason. I mean, be it Draco Meteor, or in this case, the last respects that came from the Bastion Legion, Pachirisu is always surprisingly bulkier than expected. Like, why does this thing just get to live what feels like every attack it could ever ask for? It's a little guy.
It wasn't even on full health. I believe it took an attack. And
it took something, yes. It only took like 60% from the last respects. Granted, it was only 100 base power, but oh no, it was only 100 base power stab move. That's still a lot. And from a Pokemon like Bastion Legion, who has such a high attack stat, that's really impressive. This Pokemon can't even hold Eviolite. Imagine if it could.
No.
No. But yeah, game 1 was very definitively in Uno's favor because of that excellent turn 1 play that gave them great tempo. Game 2 does go a little differently. Turn 1, the Galarian Articuno is faced against the Bastion Legion, and it attempts to Terra into Dark to, maybe resist the Bastion Legion's Ghost Stab, but come on. This is a Rain team. They're in Rain.
Crash.
It just goes for the Wave Crash, and it ends up getting one shot. Kemmel's Rain really shows itself to be no slouch offensively, as it teared through Uno's team just as they did to her in Game 1. This game was really not back and forth, but this set was back and forth. One person took an overwhelming lead, then the other took an overwhelming lead. Then, Game 3, shows that even without Stantler, competitive Gardecuno is something to fear. It punishes Kemmel's Landorus Therian hard. You don't need to skill swap your own Intimidate away. If they have an S+ tier Pokemon that has Intimidate. And once again, Galarian Articuno just ended up being the MVP of this whole set. Of course, Stantler did a great job supporting it, but come on. Who are you going to call the cool guy? The person that makes the throw to the quarterback or the one that runs it into the goal? Come on.
It was
that throw's great.
That throw's great. A fun set. And our first game that actually went to 3 games.
Yes, as we have alluded to with our commentary, the game did end in 3 games, this time a 1-2 victory in favor of the Tartarus Panda Mouse.
And next up, we actually had a YouTube video.
Yes, this one comes from a fairly well-known figure in the VGC community. This comes from Jamie Boyd, them being the coach of the Southampton Smugleafs, and them facing the
Wishing Well Washing Machines.
Yes, thank you again, Jake 8 Cake, for the amazing name. We love you. You could have written something shorter. Regardless of that, though, the Southampton Smugleafs showed up, like we said, with a video. Of course, that is its own thing. We're not going to copy, paste. We're not going to go ahead and just, rename every single point that Jamie makes. If you want a more in-depth analysis, go watch that video. It's great, it's well made, and it provides a lot of in-depth commentary about that match in specific. But just talking about their team, we do have them bringing a female Basculegion, Baxcalibur, Goldango, Gothita, Iron Thorns, and Crocodile.
Versus Jake's Tornadus, Basculegion Male, Dreadnought, Bramblegast, Rev of Room, and Raichu.
Yeah, so this is the second team we see here that has rain. This one not automatic rain with the Pelipper, but manual rain from the Tornadus. But
I remember you talking about this team in the last video, actually.
It definitely is solid. It has some good options. It has some good potential. It's not limited to just rain because you do still have the best Tailwinder arguably ever made. I mean, of course, there are some people who are going to argue against that. Jamie Boyton may be one of them, as Cottony comes to mind as a Pokemon that they've had success with. Not Whimsicott, Cottony. But yes, regardless, turn 1 was very interesting. Both players used their Terras in a very defensive manner. Torn tries to go for Terra Ghost to be immune to Fake Out, while Gothita goes for Terra Dark to be immune to a Prankster Taunt. Of course, neither player plays into the other's Terra. They just commit to their own game plans, and they do what they do best. Trick Room is able to get up, which heavily swings things in favor of Jamie Boyd. But that doesn't necessarily mean the game was over right on turn 1. I mean, Boyd wastes a turn with the Gothita as they forget that their own good as gold prevents the Goldango from being helping-handed.
Yeah, this game also featured some very cool interactions. The Goldango was weakness policy.
Yes, this was originally intended for Gothita to trigger with Foul Play. However, a crunch from the Dreadnought was able to trigger it without the Goldango dying. So, Gothita was able to just do other things that it, probably wastes with the helping hand. But still, it could have been great. And it was great, as the Goldango did put in good work. And overall, the offensive onslaught that came from Boyd after the Trick Room was up was just too much to handle. And they ended up taking game 1.
The Baxcalibur as well showed off. Jamie Boyd's first pick was that Baxcalibur.
And anyone who wants anyone who watched their breakdown video knows exactly what they wanted. They wanted setup and setup and setup and setup. Both Baxcalibur and Iron Thorns were running practically the exact same set. One was Life Orb, the other was Booster Energy, but both were Protect, Swords Dance, and then 2 attacks. Come on. I'm pretty sure the Crocodile also had Bulk Up. Goldango, I think, may have had Nasty Plot.
I believe it did.
Yeah, setup is all you need. Who needs defensive cores? Who needs, speed control? I mean, obviously their team has that, and it has it in spades, but that's nothing compared to some good old setup.
The Iron Thorns, game 3, he led the Iron Thorns, I believe, and I remember thinking that it was going to be such a bad turn 1, and then the Iron Thorns just put in work. I don't think it got KO'd or left the field.
Nope, it never did. But before we move on to game 3, let's take a step back and go to game 2. And man, Gothita was so much bulkier than it had any right to be. Jake had to launch so much offense into it just to try and take it out. And a very interesting thing we saw in this game, Gothita, it went for Terra Dark again. But this time not for the same reason as game 1. It was not for the Prankster immunity. But it did this to try and get extra damage on Foul Play against the Tornadus. A very interesting and a really clever use of Terra, but it unfortunately didn't work out as the Foul Play just barely missed the kill from the Tornadus and the Gothita died in return.
1 HP.
Yeah, it barely survived, and the Gothita did die in return, wasting the Terra. Another thing that was noticed was that Bramblegast, of all things, was able to underspeed the Crocodile for a KO, and, keeping River Room safe. Of course, this was thanks to all the speed control going on. Exact ranges weren't able to be discovered, so there was definitely some information being hidden, but seriously, if that Bramblegast was faster than the Crocodile, of course, faster, as in, it moved after, since Trick Room was up at the moment, then it's entirely possible that this would have been another 2-0 sweep. But it was able to do that. It KO'd the Crocodile. It kept the Rever Room safe. And that was really all it took for Jake to be able to stall out the Trick Room and secure a win in game 2.
Yep. And then game three, as mentioned, the Iron Thorns was pretty key.
It was crazy. It was so good. It went for Terra Dragon really early on, and it just proved to be too much. It couldn't be broken. But with all we say of it not being able to be broken, it did have a decent amount of time to try and accomplish its goal. As across turns 1 and turns 2, Jake had launched all 4 of their attacks into the Gothita just to make certain Trick Room would not go up. All 4 of their actions in turn 1 and 2 were meant purely to make sure this little baby Pokemon that's in the one of the lowest tiers, make sure this thing couldn't click a move.
I believe
This
it's
thing was a
D
threat,
tier,
not
right?
the pseudo legendary. I think that may be true, yes. Not the pseudo legendary, not the string cheese that tore up the early Scarlet Violet meta. No, the little baby. That's what we need to get rid of. And that's what you love to see about draft is these, otherwise underutilized Pokemon being able to get so much value and look so threatening.
It was certainly very fun. And
Mm.
it being a video format, not just the showdown, it was definitely pretty fun to watch as just a viewer.
Yes, Jamie did a great job sharing their thoughts and going over all their plays. We do highly recommend you check out any of the videos that were made independently of this. It's always a fun time to see. But as we alluded to, Game 3, the Iron Thorns with its Terra Dragon was just not something that Jake could break. So, Boyd got the win 2-1.
Yep. And back to Showdown, we have the Saucy Spidops versus the Dancing Dragonites
Mm-hmm.
with, I believe it's the Spidops with the Sylveon, the Salazzle, Meowscarada, another Baxcalibur, Kingambit, and Fletchling.
Yep, that is correct. This is the Baxcalibur that got first picked in the entire league, belonging to Jay. On the other side, we have T, more accurately, Tenacity, being the coach of the Dancing Dragonites, who brought Fluttermane, Hariyama, Bronzong, Glastrier, Gothorita, and Iron Jugulus, which I just learned the other week. Iron Jugulus is just it's basically saying Iron Neck. They just didn't want to actually say Iron Neck because the Paradox naming scheme is stupid.
It is certainly very interesting. And this match was pretty much Trick Room versus pure offense, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Fletchling is a low tier Pokemon, but it's certainly not something to underestimate. It still has that Gale Wings ability for really reliable Trick Room. It has things like Terra Ghost or Covert Cloak to help make sure that it can't get faked out. And also, I have a question for you. Why did Fletchling do so much damage? This thing clicked an Acrobatics into Hariyama. Now I get it. That's stab. That's super effective. It's a Fletchling. That's a Hariyama.
Was
It did
Fletchling
70%. It did 70%. I mean, I suppose the lesson here is just don't underestimate any of the not fully evolved Pokemon. We see it with the the Gothita, not even Gothorita, and we see it here with the Fletchling. I'm not over this. Why did that do 70%?
It was insane. Acrobatics does get a boost if you are not holding or have used an item. So
It's true. It's a high base power move, but 70% from a Fletchling? I'm not over this, man. That's crazy. But disregarding that one thing, Jay overall played very well. They had good switches and smart pivots to stall out T's Trick Room. And notably, we did see something pretty interesting from them. We saw Salazzle using its speed not to try and threaten things, but rather to act as a support Pokemon. And it was really cool. Housing moves like Encore and things of that nature just to help disrupt their team. It was definitely a fun showing.
Encore, Fake Out. And then, interestingly, when he used Overheat, Eject Pack came into play.
Yes, this is something that we saw across all the games Salazzle was brought. Eject Pack was crazy. It was really, really good.
You say every game it was brought to all three, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, think about it like this. It was able to do great damage. It was able to get a free switch into something else. And also, you could just simply, if its teammate got KO'd, you could just immediately bring it back in to go for another fake out. It resets the fake out because it's leaving the field and it's coming back in.
Yep.
It was a great mon overall, and it played well. Game two,
one, was definitely Trick
Mhm.
Room not getting stalled out. Definitely um, very well played under the Trick Room.
Yes,
Games
it definitely
two,
takes some effort to navigate around that when your team isn't quite built for
yeah,
it.
games two and spoiler game three went a little different.
Yes, game two, I want to highlight for a moment because we saw something really, really interesting here, and that is the King Gambit. King Gambit is known for a couple things. It has great damage, it has great bulk, and it's pretty slow. And with that speed, people usually would take it one of two ways. Either they would try and patch it up with things like Tailwind or Icy Wind or whatever, or they just hard commit to it and they go Trick Room. Jay did neither of those here. And in fact, they actually used the lower speed to their advantage, not using speed control to try and patch it up, but utilizing its lower speed tier to do insane damage with assurance. It was definitely an interesting tech, and it allowed King Gambit to get some insane kills that I think it would not have had any business getting if it was using any other move.
I do
Because
love assurance.
just its teammates being able to harass and deal a little bit of trip damage, and then just being able to smack them with that afterwards. It was great. It was a really cool showing, and it's definitely a fun thing to see. Rather than trying to use speed control to patch up a Pokemon's weakness, just leaning into it a little bit and seeing where that takes you.
And in game three, we did actually see the Flutter main.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Fluttermane. It tried to do what Fluttermane does, but unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on who you care to root for, Jay ended up positioning super well. Again, the eject pack overheat was really great, and just overall, just solid defensive play. It allowed Jay to sort of like skirt around while they were on the back foot to a point where they felt more comfortable, where they were then able to just take control and get a clean victory, ending
Yeah.
off this match as a 2-1 victory for Jay. Was there anything else you wanted to add? I apologize.
Uh, I don't. I believe one of the games. I believe it was game two. Trick Room did not get to go up at all.
I do believe that is true, yes. And funnily enough, I do believe that is the game that T won. I could be incorrect there, but I think that is
He
true.
won game one.
He won game one. Okay, my apologies there. Still, though, the fact that Trick Room did not go up, but they were able to still do such a good job to the point that, just looking at my notes, I wasn't even entirely sure who won that game. It goes to show that, again, Trick Room's great. It has its benefits. It's not the only way to build. And that's something that I still have a bit of gripe of. You have a Flutter main. You don't have to just do Trick Room. You can just press buttons.
Hariyama did a little bit of work, but I will say it got almost O-code twice.
One of those times was by a Fletchling. Like,
That
don't get me wrong, Hariyama's great. I've used it in previous seasons. It definitely can put in work, but it was not the star of the show here. If anything, I feel like it may have worn the crown of thorns for this week for nearly dying to a Fletchling. I'm not over this.
that's going down in UDL history.
Add it to the iceberg at this point. 70% to Hariyama. That's all you need to know. Not even that. Just write 70%.
Yep,
But yes,
the
overall,
iceberg does go pretty deep.
still solid play from both players. You'll love to see it. And even though one of them does now have a loss on their record, I still believe that they're going to be able to do great things coming in future weeks.
Week one is always that interesting week of half the people have to lose.
I mean,
Once you
that's
get
true of every week, but it's the only week where everyone is guaranteed to either be 1 victory, 0 losses, or 1 loss, 0 victories. And that really can skew things, especially due to the fact that we are doing a Swiss format for this season.
yep, going into following weeks, we may see our 0-1 player reach playoffs.
It's very possible. Just because you lose in an early week doesn't mean that you're out of it. You could, lose 2 or potentially, who knows, even 3 matches. You could lose weeks 1 through 3, and it's still not fully impossible for you to not make playoffs. Key
We've
point,
se-
don't give up.
we've seen
I
this
mean,
happen in world championships.
sometimes you just get paired against people who have a silly draft. Other times, it's just a bad matchup, and that's okay. Just because you're not going to get the best matchup every single time doesn't mean the loss is automatic, and it doesn't mean that any loss you may get is going to end your run. This isn't single elimination.
Nope, and I really hope we never get single elim.
I mean, playoffs, it makes a bit more sense, but for a main
Oh
season, yeah, that
yeah.
sounds horrible.
Oh, double elimination top 8.
Oh, God, let's not. In fact, I think I have a better idea. Let's go ahead and go into the next match. The Dublin Doublades, with their coach being Cell, aka Morgan, versus the Golden Goomies, with their coach being Ian. Don't confuse it with the Giddy Goomies. Most people in the server have.
Including Lime.
We're going to move on. Game. Before we
We
get into
have
game one, let's go over the teams.
Solosis with Regieleki, Tornadus, Sableye, Decidueye Hisui, Tinkatuff, and Beartick.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. I feel like you might need a little bit more of an explanation there. That Tornadus is Therian, not Incarnate. This thing is not clicking Prankster Tailwinds. They do not have Regieleki and Thunder and Tornadus. They do not have just God speed control.
That would be a little insane.
Let's not. On the other side of the field, we do have Ian, coach of the Giddy. You heard nothing. We do have Ian, coach of the Golden Goomies, with Amoongus, another Galarian Articuno, Tinkaton, as opposed to Tinkatuff, Electros, Bombardier, and Gyarados, putting a very defensive lineup here we see. Lots of bulk, lots of things to try and, be a little bit more bulky, a little bit more disruptive. But one issue I immediately saw with this team is that it's a little difficult to see an immediate win con. You see a lot of great support Pokemon, but you don't really see that centerpiece that they're all trying to hold up,
Yep, and the Tinkaton, we did not see the Tinkatuff. The Tinkaton, it was noticeable when it was not clicking Gigaton Hammer. It was not taking KOs. Even on the Sableye, clicking Play Rough into it, did, I believe, around 60 to 70%.
Right. It certainly wasn't taking any OKOs, but it was still decent enough damage to pick up a lot of kills. Going into a bit more specifics, game one, Ian admittedly got a bit into their own head, and they end up over-predicting, causing a freezing glare from the Gardecuno to land straight into a Sableye,
This is
who
not the
is
first
immune
time
to
this
it.
happens.
This is the first time it happens.
It's not the last
However,
time it happens.
correct. It is not the last time it happens in this set, as unfortunately, we do see this happen yet again, and I believe, yes, game two. I mean, it seems at some points Ian was thinking so far ahead that they were struggling to see what was actually in front of him. Going back to game one for a moment, Hisui and Decidueye actually put in some pretty good work. It did amazing damage to both Tinkaton and Electros, which allowed Solosis to, I believe, end up winning game one thanks to it.
I had this down as well. The Decidueye, I was actually really looking forward to see it in competitive VGC. Seeing it do, like, this was my first time seeing it in draft. It did work in a number of games, and I appreciated that, to be honest.
Yeah, it was definitely solid. Now, going into game two, we saw something a little bit interesting. Cell goes for Will-O-Wisp from the Sableye into the Gyarados. This doesn't seem that odd at first. However, they knew from game one that the Gyarados was Lumberry. And more than that, we saw that Sableye had knockoff from the previous game. So it really does make you wonder why, why didn't they just knock it off instead of just going for Wisp?
Like
You
they
don't
did in
lose
game one.
anything. Yeah, you don't have the potential of missing your Will-O-Wisp, and you're still able to get some extra damage. Now, notably, for that play, we did get a quote from Cell after the fact. And they said in regards to that play, quote, "Not gonna lie, I forgot about Lum. Lol." So again, remember, we like to put our players up. We like to sing their praises. Not all of them are perfect. I'm certainly not. We all make mistakes. We all make misplays. Don't expect to see the best play you've ever seen in your entire life. But hey, at the very least, try and look forward to it.
Just like the Golden Goomies, we do certainly have some golden children in the server.
Oh, come on now. Regardless, moving on to game two, yes, the Wisp into Gara was a bit unfortunate as they just forgot about the item. A second freezing glare into Sableye made it so that Ian really was losing. Both players were losing a lot of tempo. One wasn't clicking the right moves. The other was clicking the right move for some parallel future that they claimed to have seen.
Yep.
And game two, actually very notable for the end game. As despite all odds, Electros managed to carry. As into the endgame, it had to face a 1v2 against Regieleki and Torn, who I believe were either at or near full health. And the Electros actually managed to win. It managed to come out of that encounter living at 3% health, just barely hanging on by clicking Drain Punch into the Regieleki to allow it to live the moves from the Torn. It was so close.
I was going to say game one, it clicked a Volt Switch into Terra Water Decidueye. I scoffed, saying that it was pretty weak, as it didn't even KO the Decidueye. And then
Mm.
game two, it revealed Drain Punch.
And you
And
realized, wait, this thing isn't all special.
yep, and that's one of the fun things about Electros. You don't know what it's going to be until it reveals. Granted,
That's
one
definitely
set
one
might
thing that's
be.
nice.
I believe we did talk about this actually in the preseason. I noted that the Electros could go both ways.
It definitely can. Of course, it's not able to make full benefit out of them due to its attack and special attack being mixed, but I mean, hey, Volt Switch, Drain Punch, sounds to me like we got ourselves a slimy little Iron Hands, and no one's ever going to say no to that.
And we did see a Wild Charge come out later
This thing really was just doing its best hands impersonation.
with no hands.
It has hands.
We're not. No, those. No, no, no.
Those are hands. We're not getting into this
Those are not
argument right
hands.
now. Those are hands. We can hold a poll another time, except there's no real reason to, because it's very
We're holding a
obviously
poll.
hands.
Anyway.
Yes, game 3. There was something very, very unfortunate that happened for Solosis. They clicked Bleakwind Storm. And Bleakwind Storm, as you may know, has a chance to lower... It can miss, but it can also lower an opponent's speed. And this speed drop procced on Galarian Articuno, triggering competitive and allowing it to just laser eye Hisuian Decidueye on a following turn.
I do want to say the
yes.
items on Ian's side were pretty good. The Lumberry.
Oh yes, great items overall. Yeah, the Lumberry on the Gyarados, the mental herb on the Gardecuno, which was another thing
I believe
that
that was procced
Sableye
as well.
Yes, that was procced. That was another thing that Sableye could have knocked off, but they forgot.
Game 1, it was knocked off. Game 3, it was taunted into, I believe.
Yeah. But yes, Galarian Articuno, it was able to get that competitive boost. It was able to do great damage. An otherwise solid Terra in Terra Grass for the Gardecuno, to help keep it alive, make it so that it's not weak to electric, all that, would have been great. However, Regieleki followed up by Terraing into Flying and launching a Terra Blast into it for a super effective hit that I do believe killed. So, obviously, good defensive Terra. I'm never going to say no to Grass, but it was a bit unfortunate.
Reginald pulls through. Almost.
Reginald unfortunately pulled through to nobody's enjoyment. Everyone loves Regieleki, right? The cute little light bulb that some people refuse to shut up about.
Including myself.
But yes, overall, Sableye's ability to spread burn was great. It was some good defensive support all around from Solosis. However, as I mentioned before, how it didn't really seem like there was a clear offensive option, like a clear thing for the Golden Goomies to try and win with. Well, we kind of found it in competitive Gardecuno. It blew a hole right through Cell's team. I mean, of course, they were able to try and recoup. They were able to try and do things, but just the damage that thing did was too much, and it did end up giving Ian the win, leading for a 2-1 victory in favor of the Golden Goomies.
It was very back and forth and very fun to watch as well.
Yes, it was a great set from both players. Again, just because one of them may have lost does not mean that they're a bad player by any means, nor does it mean that their draft is bad. We look forward to seeing how they do in future weeks, because it's very possible they may pick up after this loss.
And the next featured battle is between the Hardened Metapods and the Nottingham Nickets.
Yes, the Nottingham Nickets, the coach of which being Mario Fan, who, going forward, I'm going to be referring to as MF. Their roster had Urshifu, Murkrow, Hisuian Typhlosion, Salamence, Rotom Mow, and Fortress. And would you like to go ahead and name a certain Pokemon on their opponent's team?
We've got Urshifu.
Yep, it's week 1, and we already have an Urshifu mirror match. I suppose we
Followed
should
up,
go over the rest of Sour's team to see who ended up building around theirs better.
we've got the Moltres, Sneasel, Misdreavus, Dundozo, and Tatsugiri.
Shout out Sneasel, great Pokemon, you'll love to see it. This is not foreshadowing in any sense.
Not at all.
Game 1, we saw Storm Drain Tatsugiri. Very notable as the Nottingham Nickets Urshifu, MF's Urshifu, happened to be Rapid Strike. So, of course, it being water, Storm Drain on Tatsugiri was able to, stop the Rapid Strike. But it did also reveal that the Dondozo wouldn't be able to get commanders, so you might think that it was just a bluff. However, that's what I thought when I was watching the replays. That, oh, okay, cool. Dondozo's just a bluff. It's Storm Drain Tatsugiri. Then Dondozo showed up. Despite the commander being off the table, Dondozo not only made it on the team, but it was actually brought to the game. You would assume that it would just stay in the back since it can't take advantage of the Tatsu, but it went crazy. Despite being both burned and intimidated, Dondozo was able to just clean up the whole game, showing that it can do a lot more than just rely on commander.
It was definitely more of a I don't want to say back and forth game one because it was pretty dominant from Sour.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, game 1, you could tell that they were both trying to figure each other's roster out. Of course, going into game 2, knowing that the Tatsugiri is Storm Drain is huge for MF, and it gives them a ton of information to play with. But still, game 1, you're vying for position, you're vying for information. It's about what you'd expect.
Unfortunately, in game two, there
Mm-hmm.
was zero damage dealt to Sour.
Yes. Turn 1, Sour was able to capitalize on a very passive turn 1 from MF, as they just simply double protected as Sour was able to set up a Tailwind. Now, one thing I do want to know, even though it didn't end up working out, and we will say outright here that yes, MF does lose this game and lose to the set, we got to see the Hisuian Typhlosion with Frisk. In game 2, it was led, and it immediately allowed it to see 2 items from the opponent. That's great information, and it's just vital to have, especially in something like Draft League, which in this format is closed team sheets. It gets that, and it's able to just get so much information. Like, you have to wonder why it wasn't in the lead, and especially in game 1, where both players know basically nothing. MF ends up setting up a Sunny Day by the Murkrow, but it works against it, as the double up of Foul Play and Heat Wave from the Moltres were enough to KO the Typhlosion, who was supposed to take advantage of that Sunny Day. Overall, Sour had a very dominant performance, and in this sense, at the very least, showed themselves as the better Urshifu. This doesn't mean that MF is out by any means, it just means that this matchup, well, Sour had a bit better of prep.
I still hate that in Showdown, in Team Preview, your Urshifu is always fighting Dark.
Yes, it is annoying, it is unfortunate. But one thing we can say about Showdown in Team Preview is that because the Misdreavus and the Dondozo were right next to each other, at certain times when their idle animations lined up, the whisker of the Dondozo made it look like the Misdreavus was wearing a cute little headband, and it's adorable, and I love it, and I'm never going to forget this for as long as I live.
I remember you guys talking about it, and then
I was doing the review for the matches, and I saw that, and I was like, wait, that's adorable. Because I love Misdreavus. My favorite Pokemon's Miss Magius, but Misdreavus is still a silly little gal.
I've been watching it throughout our conversation. I'm like, ooh, headband.
Yeah, you're like, oh, headband, and it's gone. Oh, headband, and it's gone. Just a fun, small little detail. Yes.
The idle animations are certainly very fun.
They can be fun. But yes, clean 2-0 victory to the Hardened Metapods. Great job. Amazing prep overall.
And our
Definitely someone to look out for.
Versus Urshifu.
Yes, the first mirror of the Urshifus. How many of these are we going to see during the main season? I suppose we just have to wait and see.
Depends on how many of them win.
Moving on to the next game. We got a very personal match as the Spikemuth Sylveons, who have their captain being Sky, ended up facing the Hyrule Herdiers, with their captain going by Link. These two being longtime friends and both newbies to this specific draft league. It seemed only perfect that the fates ended up lining up and having them face in week 1.
And I do want to talk about Link's team because I loved it in prep. It's the Regieleki,
Ugh.
Regidrago, Mimikyu, Corviknight, Quillfish, and Umbreon.
Yeah, the
The
double
double
Reggies.
Reggies.
Forget putting all your eggs in one basket. He put all his eggs in one sock. Facing against that, the Spikeman Sylveons had no Sylveon, but it did have a Gardevoir, an Iron Hands, Scizor, Venomoth, Girafarig, and Delphox. Notably, triple Psychics. Not something you see too often. However, more than just having triple Psychics, we ended up seeing double normals pretty early on, as Delphox it terra'd into normal. It's a little bit of an odd call, but I suppose it isn't threatened by anything. It just doesn't quite wall anything either. So a team like Lynx, who just wants to overrun you with brute force, I wonder if something like Terra Fairy may have been better for the Regidrago, or even Terra Ground for the Regieleki. Granted, it does make you immune to the ghost moves from Mimikyu, but I don't know. It's definitely a hard call to make.
It also makes you more immune to the Umbreon, so it's an understandable change.
It's true, you're not weak to the Umbreon either, but someone might question why you may not just want something like Terra Dark, since at that point, you wouldn't be immune to the Mimikyu's ghost moves, but you would at least, be able to resist a good bit more than the literal nothing you resist as normal.
Yep.
Regardless of that, though.
Game 1, I believe, goes to Sky.
Yes,
He was very
Quillfish's Intimidate cycling was quite good for Link. However, the rest of the team couldn't really make up for it. Regidrago,
did not show
I'm
up, I
gonna
believe.
say it. No, it did show up. However, you would think it didn't show up with how little it did. Regidrago did not have a great showing here. But it is worth knowing that Link got very unlucky this game, as they missed 3 Wisps during this game alone. Now, going into game 2,
taking after
Drago
Aaron,
did
not very fun.
Yeah. Going into game 2, I will admit, fine. Regidrago did something here. It did a lot of damage to both Pokemon early on, but it still didn't get either kill. Granted, after that turn 1, it was able to get more value. Terra Steel on the Gardevoir was a very questionable play, as it not only made it so that it wasn't immune to the Dragon Energy, but it gave Regidrago an avenue to hit it with a Terra Fire Terra Blast. So overall, Gardevoir, a Pokemon you would think naturally would be able to pretty much perfectly wall Regidrago, ended up being pretty weak to it in this game due to that bad Terra spot. Umbreon ended up doing a great job cleaning up the game, and Game 2 was able to go to Link, allowing us for another Game 3.
And going into Games 2 and 3, Link did a lot better with Regieleki and Quillfish, using moves like Volt Switch and Intimidate cycling a lot more.
Yes, they were able to do a great job just keeping up momentum, making sure that Sky stayed down and all that. And notably, something we saw in Game 3, or rather something we saw in Games 1, 2, and 3, Iron Hands. It was burned every single game, and there was nothing that was done to stop it. No Lumberry, nothing. I wonder if it would have even been worth to run Terra Fire just to make it so that Iron Hands couldn't be burned by the Mimikyu every single game.
I don't know if Sky was expecting the Will-O-Wisp every game, but it
Maybe
certainly
not
came
every
out.
game, but come on, it's a Mimikyu. Everyone expects the Will-O-Wisp from Mimikyu. What do? You set up Trick Room, you click Will-O-Wisp, maybe you have a Swords Dance if you feel like being cheeky.
Maybe she expected to have killed it by then.
Who knows? But speaking of kills, that's another thing Regidrago failed to do, as yet again it failed to pick up kills. But Terra Fire does prove to be very good.
Did
Not
a lot
on the
of
Iron
damage.
Hands, but yes, it did do a lot of damage, and Terra Fire on the Regidrago did allow it to Oko the Scizor, which admittedly was a huge swing. However, I'm not willing to give the Regidrago credit because Terra Fire from anything kills Scizor.
Let me have this.
No.
Regieleki, Regidrago, and Umbreon on the same team, and you're not letting me have this?
You can have the Regieleki and the Umbreon. I love those mons. They're great. Regidrago, I will never stop making fun of this thing. As long as people take it, I will continue to laugh at them for taking it.
You hear that, Link? It just got personal.
I mean, hey, to be fair, Link did end up winning the set with an end game of 1-2 in their favor. And as a little bit of spoilers, I ended up winning my set as well. So we didn't get paired for week 2, but we both won our week 1s. So it's possible we may end up playing in a future week. In which case, I'm going to continue to make fun of your Reggie Drago.
Oh boy, we will see if that happens.
Moving on from that, though, the next game, we have the Frostpunk Frostmods, coached by Trico, versus the Children of Arceus, coached by Valorant.
Valorant?
Valorant. All right, they're called Valorant now. They're now called Valorant.
I think it's Valorant.
So, Valorant ended up bringing Volcarona, Corviknight, Iron Treads, Altaria, Hisuian, Samurott, and another Umbreon.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This set was pretty clean on Trico's side.
It was pretty clean, but I mean, how can you clean without a broom? You mind telling us what their team actually was?
It was Tornadus, Florges, Arcanine, Hisuian, Azelf, Azumarill, and Hisuian Electrode, notably having 2 Hisuian forms.
Yes, and like you'd said, this was clean, because my goodness, that Azu put in work. If it didn't get burned by an I already said their team. You were the one lagging behind.
I know.
Regardless,
I'm saying
the
what
Azu
team? It just got deleted.
You know what? Fair enough. At this point, we can just skip past it. No, of course not. Like I said, the Azu put in work. If it didn't get burned by an unfortunate flame body from the Volcarona, it would have been even more one-sided. But that's the key wording. Even more. Even with it getting burned there, this was still an insane game for Trico, as their prep proved to be really good. This doesn't end in game 1 either. Game 2, man. Azumarill Aquajet. In game 1, it did a ton to Volcarona, right?
How about after a belly
game
drum?
2, who cares about Belly Drum? In game 2, the Tornadus just clicked Rain Dance, and after that, the Aqua Jet from Azumarill one-shot the Volcarona. And this time, it didn't get Flame Body burned.
Yep.
That Azumarill, it was gross. It was yucky. We say this was a clean game. It wasn't. It was gross. It was icky, and I didn't like it. I'm just kidding. I loved it. Great play from Trico.
I wish we could talk more, but I think the entire game lasted 7 turns across both sets.
It was a very short game. But yes. Valorant, some things to note. The Corviknight, it really didn't accomplish much. It was just stuck clicking body press over and over into targets that resisted it. And we saw that you did have Brave Bird. And if you had just clicked Brave Bird into the Azumarill early on instead of just going for body presses, there may have been some recourse. But because you let that thing sit around for so long and just tear up your team so much, it was able to just wipe through it. Again, it's week 1. It's not too late to fix any plays. It's not too late to improve as a player. Hell, it's very possible that Valorant is a great player and they just ended up not having a great showing. I'm not going to count them out just yet. But very clear that Azumarill, it's a known Pokemon, it's a known threat, and it's known that for a reason.
On the Discord, when you go to submit your replays, I was spoiled a little bit. Of course, these are in spoiler markings. You have to note any Pokemon that were in the back that did not get revealed. And I saw 2 different sets, both with spoiler tags. And before even clicking on the games, I go, what happened here?
Yes. Of course, there is a channel in the Discord to discuss matches, and if you're looking in there, it's generally assumed that you're accepting that you're going to get spoiled for them. You kind of have to watch them before you can discuss them.
I was talking the replay sessions. I just saw.
But yes, even the replays themselves.
It was nuts.
Yes, it was
good game.
It was
to
quite
Trico.
crazy.
Good luck to Valorant going into the next couple weeks.
We'll be able to see going forward. Was Trico as good as they looked in this game, or was Azu just a hard carry? I'm not going to say which is the more obvious play, but, I mean, Trico at this point has been around for a good couple seasons. We know them as a damn good player.
They are. And if you could not tell, it was 2-0 in Trico's favor.
Yes, I do not mean to rub this into Valorant at all. I'm still willing to say that they have the potential to do great in this league, and I never want to put people down unless they draft Reggie Drago.
Everyone, the Regidrago player won. The
And
everyone in the league does have potential to just keep going higher and higher.
except for Reggie Drago. That thing is going to be E tier next season. Moving on to the next match.
We have another YouTube video.
Yes. So again, this one, this time posted by Costa T, the coach of the Athens Victinis, facing against the Miami Heatrans, coached by Nine, aka Orange Gex, aka Slayman, aka whatever nickname they have, because I can never keep track of all of them.
It changes very often.
Very
You
frequently,
got to pay
yes.
attention to the color of the name.
More than anything, yes. Speaking of, Costa T ended up bringing Annihilate, Azumarill, Vivillon, Salamence, Mudsdale, and Earthworm.
And Nine, Orange X, etc. brought Moltres Galar, Slowking
Galar.
Galar, Quaquaval. Ooh, I am Heatran, Brute Bonnet, and Florges.
There you go. You got there in the
I
end.
got it.
Yes. So overall, this match, like we mentioned, Costa did make a video of it. They have a much more detailed overview. We're not going to be repeating all their prep there, same as we did with Boyd's video. Boyd, not Boyd. And so something really interesting. Game 1, Costa has a Choice Scarf Max HP Annihilate with Final Gambit. You know, it's not anything new. It's not anything revolutionary, but it's a really solid Pokemon, and it's a really big threat. They saw a lead of Heatran and Florges, and they elected to Final Gambit into the Florges, believing that it was such a threat that it needed to be gone immediately. However, a very unfortunate thing that we saw was that Azumarill was hard switched in on turn 1, and a Heat Wave from the Heatran burned it, which you never like to see.
Yep. And this Azumarill was an Assault Vest, so it did not have any option to Belly Drum or even Lumberry.
Yeah, it was very much so crippled by that unfortunate proc. But it is worth saying that even despite the burn, like whether or not the burn would have happened, with the Annihilate unable to Final Gambit it, a Terra Fairy Heatran ended up kind of just cleaning through Costa's whole team. Like, that thing was nigh unkillable, it felt like. And, I mean, game 2, we saw something basically the exact same. I mean, you know, turn 1, another hard switch into Azu, another Heat Wave burn. It's a very unfortunate luck. And again, Heatran was just allowed to run wild. Not getting rid of it as early as possible, I believe, is really what spelled the disaster from Costa.
Looking at Costa's team, it had pretty much nothing outside of maybe Heavy Slam on Mudsdale to actually hit a Terra Fairy Heatran.
Right. Whether you want to argue it's poor planning on Costa's part or excellent planning on Nine's part for, you know, correctly identifying that amazing threat for this matchup, it's tough to say. But one thing I do want to note from this match before we move on, because in case we haven't made it clear, it was definitely a clean 2-0 victory in favor of the Miami Heatrans, thanks to that, their namesake being the Heatran with its Terra Fairy doing so great. One quote we got from Costa during the video, quote, "That's a crit." This was in reference to the Azumarill hitting a Goltris with a Play Rough. Notably, this was not a crit. I don't know why he said that. It did like 70%. It was burned. It did like 70%. Said that's a crit. It was not a crit. I don't know why he said that. Just a fun little thing I noticed as I was watching the video. So, look, Costa, we're glad to have you. We're looking forward to seeing you in the future. Let's hope you don't get double burned turn 1 with Azu in the future.
There were some pretty fun plays. They had Earthworm on the team.
Yeah, there was definitely some fun stuff there, trying to set up Shed Tails and all that. But again, despite all their ideas, you know, things like trying to Shed Tail into a Mudsdale to try and deal with the Heatran, it just wasn't enough. That Heatran ended up just bulldozering right over their whole roster.
Yep, it was kind of back and forth, but Nine just took too much from the damage trades that Costa just couldn't keep up, and it was kind of unfortunate. I do think actually game 1, the final gambit actually did play a small part in that. Not only did it, like it of course did take out the Florges, instead of trying to maybe target the Heatran. But especially with the Orthworm playing a 3v3 while continuing to try to cycle, it doesn't quite work the same.
Yeah, like the idea is definitely there. You get what they're trying to do, but if you want to play that 3v3, because you got to remember, you're getting rid of your best Pokemon in Annihilate in order to do this. And you're getting rid of their C tier Florages. Now, as we saw from previous matches, low tier Pokemon can be very impactful and really important, but when you're staring
See,
down a Heatran,
it's it's not just not pattern recognition, it's board state recognition.
mm-hmm. Yes, it is
Even
very
if you
important to
don't take the
recognize who's
KO.
the threat. And yeah,
But
just
Costa,
overall.
good luck in the next weeks.
Yeah,
9 is no surprise, really. 9 did
yes.
actually win.
Yes, nine is very well known in our little tight knit community. They have won previous seasons plural. They're a league staff member. They're known for being a great player. So
And they've
Costa,
gotten
we're
very
sorry
close.
that we're sorry you ended up getting paired against him round one. But hey, let's hope that going forward things will be a bit more in your favor, both in terms of matchups and in terms of heat wave burns. Next
Next
match, we're
up,
almost at the end here. We only have 3 more to go.
we have our very own Bellabog Basculin, coached by what am I trying to say?
Coached by Olive, I
Olive.
presume you mean?
I was
Yes.
mixing olive and bagel at the same time.
Bagel was a previous
Uh,
name they went by, but regardless, yes. And she is, of course, facing off against Jaggy, the captain of the New Zealand Zekrom.
Olive is bringing the Gengar, Venomoth, Rotom Heat, Murkrow, Urshifu, and Iron Shreds.
Notably, that Urshifu is Rapid Strike on Olive's side. On the side of Jaggy, we have a Lumineon, we have a Fluttermane, Brute Bonnet, Grafify, Palmot, and Gothitelle. And now, going right into game 1, there's something I need to mention. That Lumineon. That thing lived a Gengar Thunderbolt. And not only did it live it barely lived it. That had to have been intentionally calced, right? Like, there's no you just accidentally stumble upon the perfect spread where you barely live a Gengar Thunderbolt. Like, that had to have been prepped from Jaggy. So already we know that this Lumineon, it's here to do work. They very clearly know what they're doing with it. It isn't just some haphazard max stats. They know what they're trying to do.
Notably, during Game 1, Olive did not actually bring the Urshifu.
Yeah, there's 2 things that really stood out in game 1, aside from that Lumineon. No Urshifu in game 1 was interesting. It's very possible they were just fearing Storm Drain from the Lumineon, but I don't know. I feel like I'd rather try and make that play in like game 2 and leave it behind after, either already seeing that Storm Drain stops me or seeing whether or not, they bring the Storm Drain in the first place. It could be considered a bit of proactive thinking. Obviously they're going to try and bring the Storm Drain, but who knows? The other thing is that Murkrow, it was able to do great with setting up Tailwind as it does, but it kind of just sat there on the field. And I feel like switching it out for something a bit more threatening after setting up Tailwind may have been good, or even if it just had more things to do other than just clicking foul play, because after the Tailwind went up, that's really all it was able to do.
Yep. And as a TCG player, I do put a lot of faith in Lumineon.
Uh-huh.
And it did put in the work.
It did in game 1, yes, very certainly. It put in so much work, in fact, that it got a bit tired. So game 2 was put on the bench. And of course, game 2 is where Olive brought the Urshifu. And it was an explosive
Urshifu
start.
things.
It was right what you'd expected. From the start, it was doing tons of damage. Olive was just off to an insanely offensive, fast-paced start that really couldn't be stopped. It went for a U-turn. The Urshifu went for a U-turn into the Gothitelle, did 81%. Later in the game, it comes back in. It clicks U-turn again into the Brute Bonnet. Okos it. Like, you think U-turn's a utility move? You think it's a pivot move? Nah, we're using this thing for damage. Another thing to note from game 2, this wasn't entirely relevant in terms of who won. I believe that this did not change the outcome of it at all. However, a Cursed Body proc from the Gengar onto the Fluttermane was certainly one way to reveal that it was a choice item, as after it got Cursed Bodied, it was forced to struggle. one could say whether or not Olive already knew it was choiced. The speed tiers are pretty easy to see every so often, but that's just hilarious, and I'm not going to act like it isn't.
No, it was hilarious. Doing that to accidental effects onto like choice scar
Mm-hmm.
Pokemon are great.
I mean, I think anyone seeing a Fluttermane have to struggle is just going to consider it cathartic after the terror this thing has been on
Everything.
VGC. Yeah. I mean, terror on singles as well. I don't play it, but I know that they don't want to play it with Fluttermane around, so they just banned the thing. I don't blame them.
Yep. And then game
Now,
three,
yeah,
Olive's
Game 3
team
was really interesting.
Olive's team got tired as well.
Yeah.
The Brute Bonnet got off, I think, 3 or 4 spores.
It got off a lot. It was able to cause Olive's team to take some big old naps during the game. But more than just that, the Brute Bonnet, it was brought in the end game to, help clean up and put in the spores and all that. Something we saw early on was Grafify on turn 1 clicking Sunny Day, despite the fact that there was actually no Paradox Pokemon currently on the field to take advantage of it. Maybe it would have been better to click Fake Out. Maybe it would have been better to try and set up something else. But the turn 1 Sun, whether or not, one would say it's optimal. It was certainly interesting to see just, that sort of level of prep in a sense, just getting that Sunny Day ready for the late game where you plan. And it very clearly shows that Jaggy was confident that they'd be able to get to that late game. Otherwise, the Sun wouldn't have really been able to do anything.
Yep, both teams did put in some planning, put in some prep.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Yeah.
game 2 was
Unfortunately,
definitely a highlighted game.
yeah, game 2 was about what you'd expect from Olive's roster. This thing, it's offense, and when it gets off on the right foot, it can be horrifying. But game 1, it just wasn't able to quite get what it needed, and game 3, it just didn't end up working out. There was some potential recourse as the Grafify ended up wasting a turn as it tried to encore the Murkrow, which, prankster and dark
Doesn't
types.
quite
It's
work.
an easy mistake to make, but it's one that never feels good. And despite Olive's efforts of, things like shutting off photosynthesis with the Rain Dance to get rid of the Sunny Day, it just didn't end up working. Flutter and Bonnet were just too much to deal with, and Spore and Flutter just managed to clean up the end game. I will say, if one move was different, it's possible this could have swung, but Jackie navigated the field well, barring their one blunder, and I don't think it's unfair to try and say that they didn't earn this victory. They definitely played very solidly.
They definitely put in prep. Going back, the
Mm-hmm.
Luminion shows it more than anything.
Yes, the Luminion was an excellent showing of understanding of what Olive wanted to try and do and what Jaggy could have done to try and stop it.
Yep, it was a 1-2 towards the New Zealand Zekrons.
Mm-hmm. But I think that quite naturally leads us into the next match, the Bodacious Bulbasaurs versus the Inazuma Iron Hands. Now, this is quite the match to see in week 1. These are two players that are well known in the league for being some of the best. Amelia, coach of the Bodacious Bulbasaurs, and Robbie, coach of the Inazuma Iron Hands.
Yep, with Robbie having the Vivian Tundra form, Cerulege, Quillfish Hisuian, Magnezone, Inteleon, and our last Urshifu.
Mm-hmm. Amelia, on the other hand, had Hisuian Typhlosion, Sneasler, Rillaboom, Overquill, Ditto, and Altaria. We got 3 Legends Arceus ads on this team. It's cool to see. And speaking of cool
Blast
to
from the
see,
past.
yes! Typhlosion! It had the immediate frisk. Game 1, it was led, and it was able to just immediately get that. Pokemon is often a game of information. So immediately, Amelia was off to a lead right there. Some good pivots after turn 1 led to another full round of frisk. And I'll admit, I may be biased, but I love the ability. And Amelia did a great job using it to scout tons of information super quickly.
Frisk is a really cool move, or a really cool ability.
Yeah, it's just cool. It's great to see. It allows you to play the information game way better than most, and it's just nice. And I'm glad to see it actually being used.
And this was another Pokemon that did not really like to hit its icy winds, I will say.
This Pokemon, I believe, referring to...
Overquill.
Yes, Overquill. Thank you. And yeah, very unfortunate misses from Icy Winds. It, of course, making it so that you can't quite do what you want is always unfortunate. You missed, you basically lost a turn. But this was especially bad, as that Icy Wind would have been enough to kill the Inteleon. But because it missed, the Inteleon lived, and it was able to KO the Hisuian Typhlosion. And not only that, the following turn, the Overqwil goes for Icy Wind again and misses both of its targets. You have to imagine that Amelia was really frustrated after that, as they made a perfectly fine play, but just got punished for it.
Yeah, it was really unfortunate. Game 2, though, was a little more interesting. The
Yes.
Ditto came in.
Yes, thanks to the assistance from Ditto, we got to see both Hisuian Quillfish and Overqwil on the same side of the field. So, fun little moment there. You got a little bit of family bonding.
With Amelia
But,
saying, "Don't talk to me or my son ever again."
of course, unfortunately, that family bonding time was time that should have been spent trying to deal with the Cerulege, because, to be entirely honest, this thing took over. This thing was a tyrant. It was clear amulet, and it put in work. That item, really good. It was able to avoid 2 Icy Wind speed drops and 2 intimidates, allowing it to set up and just take over. Once that thing got going, once its engine got revved, the game was over. Like, regardless of what happened in game 1, in game 2, Cerulege was the very clear MVP. That thing just annihilated Amelia's whole roster.
I don't believe the Urshifu did a lot of work this game, unless it did a bunch game 1, and I'm not remembering.
I mean, the Urshifu was solid. You're never going to be too upset with Urshifu,
Yeah,
but
Urshifu
it's
is
funny
Urshifu.
to think that, yeah, despite the fact that Urshifu is here, it wasn't even the standout Pokemon. It would ended up being a good old Mega Man. Like, this thing, it put in so much work. And that clear amulet, like I said, it was just the perfect item, and it very clearly showed that Robbie had great awareness of what they were trying to do.
It was. Oh, I lied. It was a Terra Ghost set actually on the Urshifu. It was Choice
Mm-hmm.
Band.
Yes, just meant to do as much damage as you can ever ask for.
Yep, definitely. It was definitely a fun set to watch. Maybe
Oh,
less
yes,
because of the
absolutely.
actual plays and more of the players themselves, especially
Yeah.
knowing them a little more personally. You
Both
can
players are great. You love watching them. We are always looking forward to seeing their games. And even though it did end up being a clean 2-0 victory for Robbie, Amelia, like we said, is no slouch. She's definitely a person to look out for in this entire league.
absolutely. And that brings us to our last game of the week
Yes, and
with
if you
our
don't mind,
very own Frozen Lime Volt.
mhm, if you
Take
don't
us
mind,
away.
I would like to go ahead and just take over here a bit.
Go for it.
So, this week, as we've mentioned, Smeargle is not part of the draft league this season. However, I am. I am a coach. I'm the coach of the Santa Maria Samurats. And week 1, my opponent was Nilly, coach of the Kill Team King Gambits. And I need you all to understand. I dropped a nuke. I made Oppenheimer look like a child. Let me back up a little bit real quick. Their roster ended up being Iron Hands, Pincurchin, Hydreigon, Delphox, Sableye, and Spidops. I had Annihilate, Sneasel, Rotom, Wash, Goltrez, Fungus, and Donphan. And when I say I dropped a nuke, I mean it. Game 1, turn 1, I led with Annihilate plus Sneasel. I had the Annihilate Terra into the Ghost type. And I had the Sneasel, who was max speed, min attack, all my Pokemon with the exception of Donphan and the Annihilate were min attack, click Beat Up into my Annihilate, which triggered a weakness policy thanks to the Terra Ghost. And with a weakness policy, Terra Ghost, Beat Up, which hit 4 times, allowing for Rage Fist to then be a 250 base power move. I killed them. Believe it or not, they died. They died. They're gone. I actually killed them IRL. I'm so sorry to say this is actually a funeral. That joke aside, I would like to share a calc real quick. That calc was very overkill. I agree. However, it was the only way I could have reliably killed a defensive Iron Hands. And more than just reliably kill a defensive Iron Hands, this set did 130 to 143% damage to a max HP, max defense Iron Hands. This thing eviscerated it.
Now
Turn
that's a lot
one.
of damage.
Yes, turn one. The Annihilate Rage Fist and immediately killed the Iron Hands. Something to note about this play as well. The Sneasel was Inner Focus and the Annihilate was a Ghost type. So it couldn't even be faked out. This play was all but guaranteed unless there was some shenanigans going on. Something like Quash on Sableye. I'm not even sure if it gets Quash this gen. But regardless. After that, Hydreigon came out, which was, to be fair, an honest threat. It, of course, is a Dark type to my Annihilate, who now is weak to Dark. So I just simply protected it. I had Sneasel come back out to put out Foongus, who could then Rage Powder to protect the Annihilate. Delphox and Hydreigon both were forced to target into the Fungus due to a Rage Powder, and then from there, Annihilate just continued to clean up. It killed the Hydreigon. Cool. It killed the Hydreigon. It didn't end up getting to kill the Delphox, but that's fine, because it also got to kill the Pincurchin. So 3 of the kills in Game 1 went to the Annihilate, and the last kill ended up going to the Donphan, who was specifically calced with a Choice Scarf to be able to outspeed a max speed Delphox, so that I'd always be able to get the jump on it. So Game 1, basically, everything went according to plan. However, one thing I also want to mention is that at the end of Game 1, I had Sneasel click a worthless fake out. It wasn't turn 1 of its being out, so it failed. However, because I did that, previously all Sneasel had done was click beat up and then immediately switch out. So I bring it back in, I click fake out, it obviously flinches them, and then I click fake out again. That tricked Nilly into believing that the Sneasel ended up with a Scarf in order to make certain that nothing could interrupt the Annihilate. It wasn't. It was just Focus Sash. But not only was I able to hide the information of the other moves the Sneasel knew, but I was also able to trick him into a Scarf, which, hey, call me stupid, call me smart, I don't care. I think that was a cool play. Regardless, Game 2 wasn't nearly as interesting. Goldtriz was able to do very well. I made sure that I had enough bulk that after an Iron Hands got burned, a Wild Charge would only end up doing 50%, activating Berserk and a Citrus Berry. But post that, it was just solid, reliable play. I had good bulk, I had good defense, and Annihilate and Donphan did a great job cleaning up the end game, giving me a clean 2-0 victory. Nilly, I love you. I'm going to keep saying that you drafted a Trick Room team. That's not going to stop me. However, I have become weakness policy, the beater up of Rage Fist.
And that was our last match submitted.
Yes, that was all of them for week 1. Thank you all for joining us. We hope that you had a great time listening in, and we're looking forward to seeing you in future weeks. Smeargle, is there anything else you wanted to add before we all head out?
I was just going to ask, what did you think of week 1?
I think Rage Fist. It was very fun. We got to see a lot of cool strategies. We got to see a lot of cool things. I was able to convince several people in the Discord that I'm clinically insane. The people I did convince were the only... Yeah, they were some of the only ones that weren't already convinced I was clinically insane. You know, I kind of got a reputation to uphold. Come on now.
Yeah, you're working with me, man. I do kind of rub off a little bit.
Oh, come on. I was stupid before I met you.
You were stupid, but now you're weaponizing it.
Yes! Rage Fist! Regardless of that, though, yes. It was a great time.
Very fun games.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it was a great time. Very fun games, and I'm very much so looking forward to week 2, which, hey, by the time this video has come out, pairings for it are already up. So if anyone here is interested, the Discord is public. You are able to join it. And let's see if this time, whether or not Smeargle actually remembers to add the link in the description.
Thank you for reminding me.
If possible, while we're at it. Actually, go ahead and also add in Boyd's and Costa's videos in the description as well, so people who are interested can check those out.
I did remember to do that.
Perfect. Regardless, I do believe that's going to be everything, so I think it's time for us to head out for this week.
Alrighty. Thank you, Frozen Lime Volt, for joining me this week, and I look forward to talking to you again next week.
Thank you for having me on the UDL podcast. I'm looking forward to it. Bye, everyone.
Having a good one.